This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
We're back at the Hunt Nebraska headquarters here doing another hangout today. And folks, we've got the same crew with us. Kayla on the boards, Jeff over here on the Squirrel call. We've got Deer Hunter Jackson right here. We might have to get an update on that. But, Jeff, you've got something cool going on. Oh, and I'm Hershey as well. And make sure you give a like and subscribe to this podcast as well as the Hunt Nebraska Facebook page, that spot where all hunters of the great state of Nebraska and recreational shooters can find a home and chat with other like-minded folks and get some inside scoops on what's happening at the Nebraska Game and Parks in just those areas. So make sure you do that and comment below. Give us a thumbs up, all that great stuff. Jeff, You came to play.
Well, it's all about playing, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what this is? Some people like Jackson, it's not playtime, it's pretty serious. But I think for the rest of us, it's a little bit of playtime. But, this is December. We're in December right now, and I know a lot of people think muzzleloader deer. That starts December 1. Jackson and I will both be out chasing. I know, Kayla, you'll be out chasing deer. Hershey, I suspect you might. I believe you might.
We've got nothing over Kayla, who right after this podcast, I think, is thinking deer.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
I don't blame her.
Which is going to be
some people take the entire month off just to go deer hunting.
Is going to be Jackson. I think Jackson's going to be distracted knowing someone else is out deer hunting. He's not.
He's been distracted since September 1.
There you go. But there's more to December than just muzzleloader deer.
Well, this is squirrel season, and it is. It's been on since August 1st, but it is December for me and January, the 2 months I think that are the most fun to chase squirrels.
Why is that?
Well, all the leaves are off the trees. You can see them. A lot of the other hunting opportunities that you might think are more favorable for hunters are winding down a little bit. And as we head into late December, early January, things change in the squirrel woods, make them pretty active, make it a lot of fun to be out there. So, and so there's that and just a lot of other reasons. I think the weather's fairly favorable. I don't like hunting when it's 80 degrees. I don't like hunting when it's minus 10 either. But you get in December, I think we got a lot of favorable weather. In fact, right now, it's one of my first questions to you guys. We've got 10-day forecasts. And it's not below 40 degrees. I don't think any one of those 10. Nighttime, yeah, but okay, big whoop. But daytime forecast, not below 40 for the next 15 days. How do you feel like that is impacting squirrel movement?
I got to say they're going to be more active. That'd be my vote. They don't like that cold stuff, that wind, that snow, or that rain we might get this time of year. It obviously is. It's got to help.
Oh, I think absolutely does.
I'm here to learn.
You come to me to learn.
Right?
You're going to be disappointed.
You think about it in other terms, though, too, Kayla and Jackson, is, this isn't my ideal muzzleloader deer season weather.
Not
yet.
even close.
Now, there's still some activity going on, and folks will do real well, I think, this first weekend and first week, because they're going to be able to sit longer and be more comfortable. Waterfowl, this isn't what you think of when you think of December ducks and geese.
No.
Even with pheasants, I think that, and perhaps a little bit with quail, you get these warm days, they don't need to be in the thick cover. They can see you coming then, almost like prairie chickens and sharp-tailed grouse now. Now they can not only hear you coming through that brush, but they're not hiding in it, so they're just going to move out. Being in that sparser stuff can be harder on the dogs.
Yeah.
So squirrels, you're telling me is better?
Every squirrel hunter's dream is to, run out in December and get those, 30, 35 degree day and sunny and calm winds. We've had that. We'll have that for the first half of December, it looks like, and sunny and warm type weather. Anything above, 30, 32, 33 degrees, I consider warm. And here we are at 40, 50, 60 degrees, 70 degree temperatures.
No, don't say 70.
Incredible squirrel hunting weather. And so, this is the time. If you've ever thought about being a squirrel hunter, this is the time to get out and have a little fun, because they're getting a little more active. They're doing a lot of feeding, and the weather's just been conducive to squirrels getting up in the morning and just being squirrely all day long.
Well, here's a question for you, because I think that our generation, Jeff, we cut our teeth oftentimes on squirrels, rabbits, maybe some pheasant and quail thrown in there as well. But squirrel is something you often hunted as one of the first things.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that as much. Why is it that perhaps that tradition isn't being carried forward as much as it was for us?
Well, and a good question. Why isn't it? Because there's just not as many people started out on squirrels. They're moving right up to bigger game, deer, turkeys, that kind of stuff. And so they're skipping that step. And I think that comes from that, woodsmanship of people just being outdoors and hunting everything that you can hunt during the fall, and going to that big weekend type hunt or that big, hunting trip that they take every once a year, once every couple of years maybe. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. Plus a squirrel, if somebody doesn't take you squirrel hunting and show you how to, clean squirrels and eat and cook squirrels, it's not as straightforward and you would think it is, but it's not compared to a deer or bird. Birds are fairly straightforward. Squirrels, I think to some people are not. So I think that takes a little bit away from it as well. It's just not that type of thing that's been handed down. There's been skips in generations, whereas before we ate a lot of rabbit and squirrel. My mom will tell you she grew up eating, rabbits. That was their staple meat on the farm was rabbits.
I think back to it now. You talk about it, Jeff, and this kind of jogs my memory. I mean, for you, Jackson, you think about deer just about every day.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, you've got a property you're able to kind of tweak a little bit here and there. What do I want to do? More deer? What can I plant? Is there a food plot? I mean, that has become big time. Growing up, a lot of the deer hunters I knew, it was kind of a break from pheasant hunting or squirrel or rabbit or what they might be doing. And if you drew a tag, you had to apply for it oftentimes.
Yep.
And now deer hunting for some people is a year-round endeavor. I mean, they love all that.
We're definitely spoiled in the time that we're in for deer hunting right now.
Well, these have been the good old days for deer hunting for how many years now? 20 plus years. And so I think that has an impact too, a huge impact on it. But squirrel numbers have not been decimated. The squirrel numbers have been low. And so, I think a lot of time it's just we have limited time. We don't have the hunters today that spend 20, 30, 40 days out in the field hunting. Like we did 40, 50 years ago. And that was what we did, right? Yep. Now, I know the people at this table are a little bit of an anomaly because we do probably spend like that kind of time out or more. But, if you've only got a couple weekends that you're planning to hunt, you're probably not going to do squirrels. You're probably going to focus on deer.
And you think about it.
Maybe a walk for birds.
You just take a drive across anywhere in the country here in Nebraska, and you're going to see deer blinds out there. A lot of, specialty built or purchased or whatever, getting them set. We didn't have that. We sat on a bucket and we froze and we swore we'd never go deer hunting again until the next season rolled around. We forgot about how much we froze to that bucket and
some
how
of us
cold
have
we were.
Blinds, Hershey, so some of us are doing it that way too.
I think it's kind of changed a little bit, but I hear a lot of state agencies talk about, and we're one of them, squirrels being underutilized resource.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. They're totally underutilized. And I'm going to throw it back to you because when you think of all the things a hunter needs to be successful, get out in the field, what's one of the key things they have to have?
For squirrel hunting?
For any hunting.
For any hunting?
Mm-hmm.
A gun.
Well, they have to have access, right?
Access.
And, whereas you go out and knock on a door for deer access, that's not the easiest one. That might be in the top two for difficulty. Still very, very available here in the state of Nebraska, but it takes a little more work. How many times have you knocked on the door for squirrel hunting?
In my time hunting, probably 2 or 3 times at most. It's either spots I already had access to or more often than not, recently it's probably been on public accessible lands.
And rarely do people turn you down, right? And of course, squirrel hunting. No, I'm saving the squirrels for my nephew. No, nobody really says that. And you hit the nail on the head there. Public lands are highly available for squirrel hunting, and where you feel like, I'm going to see squirrels when I go to public. Well, you do. That's where you'll find a lot of squirrels. And so access is just incredible. So it's an easy thing to do. And so, let's kind of move on here in terms of squirrel hunting. I want to get into that, some of the hacks, some of the things that, people may not think of. But let's just start basic. What do you consider some of the gear that a squirrel hunter has to have, essential gear?
That I always think of it being pretty, slim. You don't need much more. You need a gun. You need a place to go. Oftentimes, that .22 rifle, that shotgun, perhaps if you've got that handy 410, just about perfect squirrel shooting iron, in my opinion. But I want to know too. You're gonna have to walk us as we talk about this equipment. Is what does a December squirrel hunt look like?
Well, yeah, we're gonna get into that because it's once you figure out what you need for equipment, that kind of just decides a little bit about how you're gonna chase squirrels in December. I think you're right. .22 rifle is about key for December. Whereas we start a lot of times that 410 might not be bad in September and October when there's a lot of leaves on the trees, but when we get into December now, the leaves are gone. They wanted to hold on. They didn't want to leave. November was a tough year to get rid of leaves. but they're off the tree. You can see a long ways. A 50-yard shot on a squirrel right now is totally possible. Whereas a month ago it would have been almost impossible to make that to see that distance. So I agree. Rifle hunting, good rifle with a scope on it. It's even better. Good 22 sighting on that rifle that's shooting accurate for squirrels. 1 inch at whatever distance you want to shoot. If you can shoot 1-inch groups 25 yards, there you go. 50 yards, there you go. Is absolutely perfect. You hit the nail on the head. Now, when you say minimal, what do you mean by minimal for gear when it comes to squirrel? A rifle?
Yeah, I
something to sit on.
To me, it's oftentimes wear camouflage, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah,
I've gone to the woods with just that. I mean, it's nothing more than the clothes to keep me warm, and off you go. Now, in my advanced experience, I would probably say something to sit on. Because to me, squirrel hunting for the most part is a sit. I want to see if you guys do the same thing, but I always sit and wait for them to move and give away their location. But early on, I just slowly walk through the woods, look for movement, zero in on it, and go from there. So I didn't use anything much more than the rifle and the clothes on my back.
I would say everybody would probably agree with that December is sit and wait when it comes to squirrel hunting, because you can't get away with the movement that you got away with in October anyway. So and the more comfortable you're going to be, the better your hunt's going to be. You're going to have more enjoyment, but you're also going to sit longer and see more squirrels. And so some of those chairs that have that high little bit of a back to it, the cushion that you can just sit on the ground, they weigh next to nothing. You tie them to your waist and walk in the woods, sit down, pull up the back on it, and just lean back up against a tree. Man, those are like heaven when it comes to squirrel. All right, we got the gear. It's pretty basic. I'll add a few more as we talk here, but let's talk about this December hunt, because to me, like I said before, one of my favorites. Get into the squirrel woods and sit down and just relax and wait for squirrels. Now, do you guys do a lot of waiting, or do you do anything else to try to entice those squirrels to give up their location?
Well, my squirrel hunting experience when I was a kid, and this is what I did when I was young,
Yeah.
I knew where they would come and go. I almost hunted them like deer, and I would ambush them. I knew they had to cross. There was one tree that they had to get. Exactly. There was 2 patches of trees, and they would go from one to the other. And I knew if I could cut them off, and they didn't see me before I beat them to that pinch point, I'd get my shot. So now, that's how I hunted them.
Kayla, do you think of that type of thing, squirrel hunting, pitch points, saddles, that kind of thing?
That's too deery for me.
I
but
totally
it's
understand.
Totally true, though.
Yeah.
It's totally true. You'll have those connections where there'll be a wood lot that you're hunting, and then there'll be just a fence row of trees. A lot of times, Osage trees and those fence rows connect into another some other timber nearby. That little runway can just be incredible. In fact, everybody will be sitting in the woods. Sometimes I'll go sit out of the woods on that runway and just all morning long take squirrels off that runway as they're heading from one wood lot to the other, or heading from the field and coming out of the cornfield, because they're voracious corn eaters. They love corn, and getting to that runway, that fence row, and running back into the wood lot up on those trees. It can be some of the best hunting around.
Makes sense.
So, but sometimes they don't cooperate. Yeah. And I know you guys have done all kinds of crazy things, I'm sure, over the years. I get kind of crazy. I've done some pretty crazy things over the years when it comes to lack of cooperation. Now, Hershey, are you a big caller when it comes to squirrels at all?
No, I'm usually waiting for them, or in the past I've had the little Mr. Squirrel whistle.
Yeah,
okay. The distress call seems to work better early on in the season than any other time. But I've noticed that when I deer hunt, or if I've been out in fall turkey hunting or something like that, I see oodles of squirrels. Yeah. So I just try to put on that air. I even tell the squirrels I'm deer hunting, just to help sell the whole gig. But when they know I'm squirrel hunting, they seem to disappear a little faster.
Isn't that the case though? You're out sitting in a tree stand with a bow and arrow in your hand, and squirrels they're annoying. They'll just come out and give you up every time. Right there, he's right over there, and they're traders is what they are. They'll sell you out every time.
Or they sound much heavier than they actually are.
Oh my gosh! How many times you sit in a deer stand, and you're thinking, God, that buck is right behind me. Yeah. And you spend the next 2 minutes turning around trying to get the shot on that buck, and you look down, and there's this fox squirrel just sitting there staring at you like, what are you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
See, I've been able to levitate while spring turkey hunting because of squirrels. I mean, that gobble would get closer and closer, and this was before I had my first gobbler, and you could tell he was getting closer, and pretty soon, he kind of snuck around behind me, but then you heard that, And it just like, oh my goodness, he's right there. And it got closer and closer and closer. And then when that squirrel jumped from the leaves onto the tree about 6 inches behind me, I'd never been attacked by a turkey before. That they didn't cover in the videos or the books, but I was trying to figure out what was going on.
What's the best body position for a turkey attack?
And I will tell you, it was tough for that squirrel to hold on to the tree while it was laughing so hard. But 6-8 inches for a good 15 seconds.
I bet you could see him go into the fetal position real quick.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a lot of ways a person can kind of get their attention. Sitting is one. I mean, just sitting there relaxing. You'll have squirrels wake up in the morning. Of course, with this weather here, they may, it's anybody's guess. They may wake up early and go to feeding. They may wake up late and go to feeding, but generally they're going to wake up fairly early, I think, in this kind of weather, and because there's nothing to hold them back. And so they'll get up kind of a normal morning, kind of play around, goof around, do some feeding around the trees, and then they start heading out into the fields and getting some corn and that kind of thing. And it's a long morning. It's an all-morning process, and so it can be good at 8 o'clock. It can be good, but you don't have to get up at the crack of dawn like all the other critters you got to do, because squirrels, by and large, they're a little lazy. Unless there's a real need for them to get up early and feed, they won't be up like at crack of dawn. So you got plenty of time.
That sounds really nice.
Well, some of us burn ourselves out all season long trying to get up at 4 a.m. and get out into the woods.
So right now with this warm weather, are they going to get up earlier, later? They're
going to get up just kind of like they were doing in September and October. They're going to get up and they'll first crack of dawn. There'll be squirrels starting to move around. Others are going to start waking up slowly. First hour of sunrise, there'll start to be a lot of movement, a lot more squirrel movement, and that'll go on for several hours. And what screws up squirrel movement, what's going to really slam that tight, is when you get cold weather and all of a sudden they wake up. Nope, not today. And I mean, they're right back in their dens, or if they're up in a nest, they might still stay in a nest and stay warm up there with other squirrels, but they don't want to come out. And of course, wind, even on 40-degree day, if it's real windy, that can screw up squirrel movement, because number one, it's cold, but number two, they can't detect predators because wind's blowing, trees are blowing, everything, and so it makes it a little more concerning for them as well.
Well, I got to say that wind, becoming one of my least favorite things to hunt in. Strong winds. There's a magic number from somewhere between 5 and 12 miles an hour or something like that. But I've noticed the times I've gone squirrel hunting, it's hard on me to detect. I'm looking for that movement to begin with, and when the whole forest is moving, a squirrel walking out on a branch does not stick out.
No. Cloudy, windy days are pretty much the worst days to hunt squirrels of all. And sunny, calm days, perfect for squirrel hunting. Even when it's cold out, on a sunny day, they'll get out there and sun themselves, right? They'll sit there and just sit up on a branch, and you'll see those squirrels up on a branch with their tail kind of laid down behind them, and they're just sitting there just trying to get some sun and just warm up a little bit. But cloudy days, snowy, rainy days, forget it. I've had very little luck. Sometimes you can get a squirrel to stick his head up and look around, calling to them, but usually they're in the den, they're not coming out. And so, these sunny days we're having now perfect for that. But even then, they come out of those dens, and sometimes, you can hear them, but you can't see them. And I like to get them talking. I like to get squirrels talking. One thing I learned years ago was one of my predator calls has actually become one of my all-time favorite squirrel calls, instead of a dying rabbit, which is a that works for bringing in predators. It also works for squirrels, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But one of the things that it really does is just the squirrel bark and chatter, and it's just a. And man, I like to sit there at the base of the tree and just.
Now, what do you think the squirrel that's hearing that? What do they think's going on?
Jeff's here.
Jeff's here.
Yeah,
that's what that was.
It never works. They're sitting in the dens going, Jeff's out there. No, and what they're thinking is the squirrels, getting excited. Maybe they found something to eat. Maybe they're mad at other squirrels. As we move in through December here, this really works well, because now we're getting to that mating season and things start to kick up here, and the chasing period and territorial.
The squirrel rut.
Yeah, the squirrel rut is what we've called it. The squirrel rut is a strong rut. Yeah, and this can work. Just can be deadly for that, because then all of a sudden they hear another squirrel, and honestly, I don't know if I'm a male or female squirrel when I'm blowing on this thing. I'm not that. I'm not that into it. I'm not that good. But.
Sometimes during the animal rut, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, they want to check out either one of them, whether it's a female coming in or a potential, trespasser, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. They stick their heads up, look around, and they'll start barking back at you. And all of a sudden, you'll see one squirrel bouncing across the treetops, and gosh, he's a ways away, but he's getting closer. And I'll just sit there and or just and just kind of give them those little barks and chatters, and just keep it nice and calm, and just talking, doing my thing, eating. I care less about you. But that other bull, he's mad. He's coming in, right? So that squirrel's coming in, and so that can really bring some shots in as well. So a squirrel call. Now you can buy all kinds of calls that make noise where you use your hand in a little rubber tube, or you can blow into these calls to make the call. This when I'm doing this, and you can kind of adjust the volume and the cadence yourself, but these work great. They'll work, especially as we move along in the month here. So that's one hack that I think is a lot of fun for squirrels. I've gone to some crazy extremes. I remember one time, Dick Turpin. I've squirrel hunted with him a number of times. I'm name dropping here. It makes me sound good, but anyway, we've squirrel hunted. I learned a lot from Dick. But one of the things I did learn is squirrels hate predators. And they will mob predators from the tree like it's nobody's business. You've all been there, right? You walk into the squirrel woods and sit down, and what happens? They start barking at you.
Because you're the predator.
Oh, yeah, you've heard it all the time. You sit there in the tree stand, and you're thinking, my gosh, this is getting ridiculous. And so we took a stuffed bobcat out in the squirrel woods and set that bobcat down and went and sat in the tree. And sure enough, squirrels came out and were barking at that bobcat. And we learned that from seeing just regular old wild house cats. Regular old house cats that got wild and they run around the woods all their own, live wild, live outdoors. And you're sitting in a tree stand deer hunting, and all of a sudden you hear squirrels just going nuts on the corner of the property. You look out there and there's this white cat walking through the trees, and the squirrels are just kind of in the trees following it, just barking away at it. And so that can, any predator is going to get their attention. They don't like predators. And so they like to try to mob them a little bit from the tree. They don't get down and chase them like birds, but they like to mob them from the tree.
So I got to get a mountain bobcat.
Yeah, that'd be my
or take the house cat.
Or take the house cat.
You got a bird dog, so why not get a squirrel cat?
That's true. Gus
thought about
Gus
that.
needs to earn his keep.
Bringing a barn cat with you. Okay, do your thing.
I think white would be a good, safe color and visible.
I'll run it by with my wife.
There's a lot more people who might have run that by.
Just send Snapchat pictures back to her from the fields. Say, hey, I figured out what Fluffy's real calling is. Right there.
It's enrichment. Trying to
there you go.
Yep.
You need to spend more time with that cat. Okay.
All right.
I got an idea. Now, I know you guys are predator hunters and been out predator hunting, and predators are also very eye-focused critters, right? They look for something that they think is supposed to be there that maybe isn't there. Now, have you guys? I suspect you guys have had some involvement with using some of these fuzzy little critters to try to draw in predators.
Yep.
Battery operated.
Yeah,
for those listening, you turn it on, and what happens?
You turn it on, and you sit and stare at it for a little bit. Think good thoughts, and there it goes.
Yeah, you got to do a countdown on this one.
And it just gives it some fuzzy, furry movement. Now, back in the day, when I first started predator hunting, that's probably 40 years ago now, maybe, probably about close to 38 years ago. They didn't have any of these gizmos. And so I, didn't even think about it. I'd throw like turkey decoys out there, and of course that would work once in a while. But when I started dating my wife, she got the gift of a lifetime that became, it had a lot of meaning to me. And I don't know why, but her mom and dad got her a rabbit fur hat. And a really nice one, came in a box, a presentation case type box and everything. And I know she wasn't wearing it. And so I decided, in the snow, put that thing out in the snow and call it. It looks like a rabbit, right? How bad could this be? And that worked. It brought in a red-tailed hawk who grabbed that thing, and it was gone before I could even blink. And I'll never forget it as long as I live, because I'm sitting there, we didn't have a cell phone at the time, but I'm sitting there thinking, I'm going to have to tell my wife about this. And now, luckily, I found it on the other side of the draw, because it was in the snow laying there. But the hair started falling out after that. I don't know what happened. But anyway, so this is a lot easier than that rabbit fur hat.
Back to the rabbit fur hat, though. So how many years after that did you write on Jen's Christmas list? Another rabbit fur hat for Jennifer.
Yeah, she loves these.
Yeah, she loves.
We're going to need a whole set.
Worn out the first one.
We need a jackrabbit hat. And could you get one with the ears on it? That would really help me a lot.
There you go.
So it worked out really well. But yeah, these things right here, squirrels like, or don't like movement in the woods. And so they'll come investigate a lot of times.
Which is kind of interesting for predators. I mean, this thing on the floppy stick that spins and then shuts off and then spins and pauses and all that type of stuff. For predators, obviously, you're making sounds of an injured critter. So they're looking for something flopping or in pain or something like that, which tells the deal. Where squirrels, it's just that thought that I don't know what that is. That might be a predator, might not.
That's a good question, because I've had it work both ways, where I just leave it out there, don't make any sound, just let it sit there and run, and I'm 20, 30 yards from me, and squirrels that I might not have seen sitting up in a tree, and then they start barking at it and looking at it, and they're totally focused on it. And oftentimes I've seen them jump across trees and come down the tree and just sit there on the trunk of the tree barking at this thing. And so I think that's part of it. The lure, I think, with calling, I know it gets their attention when I call.
Sure.
And they look for movement, and they see that fur, and they're not putting it together that it's it's a mojo whatever type deal. But that kind of leads me to another hack, because a lot of times squirrels just they're not playing. I mean, all morning long sit there and they're just not playing. And so you think, man, I'm the world's worst squirrel hunter. Well, no, they're just not playing that day. You're just not going to have an opportunity. So a lot of times, and this is how I learned this. I started, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. I haven't seen a squirrel. Let's call him and see if a coyote or something will come in. So I'd get out my predator calls, and I'd sit there and just start. I got the mojo out, right? So why not? And just start calling, and lo and behold, I started having squirrels coming out of the woods and start chattering and barking at me, and I'm thinking, wow, this thing is powerful, right? and they'd come out and just start jumping trees and coming toward me, and I might shoot 1 or 2 squirrels right before I was about ready to leave. And so after a few times that happening, there's something to this. I'd always now, especially in late season, I always bring my predator call with my rabbit squealer, whether it's my squirrel call or an actual louder, higher pitched rabbit squealer. And it's my last ditch effort before I leave the woods a lot of times.
So I got a question. So you're talking kind of a little bit of a time frame there. Do you call and then move? From deer hunting, I pick my spot and I'm there either half day or all day.
Yeah.
Whereas like coyote hunting, call for 30, 45 minutes, and then I move.
Yep.
So is there some correlation there?
Good question. I don't. I sit in one place, and I might sit there for an hour. If I don't see any, if I'm calling and doing whatever I'm going to do, and I don't see any squirrels for an hour, then I'll get up and move. But I usually sit there for quite a long time. I don't like to move around, because as soon as you get up and move, you've just alerted every squirrel that there's something not right there, right? And then you go walk 100, 200 yards down and sit down again. It takes a while for everything to calm down and squirrels to start going out and doing squirrel things again. So, but I do that, especially if they're not responding.
So what if you're having luck? Let's say you sit down, you shoot 1 to 3 squirrels,
Then I sit there until there's no more, I don't see any more squirrels.
Okay.
I might, if the squirrels are just, every 15, 20 minutes I'm seeing squirrels and I'm shooting a squirrel, and then all of a sudden I've had a 40-minute dry spell or 30-minute dry spell, I might move after that.
Gotcha.
Well, that's a great question. Let's go a little further. What can you expect at a really good spot for hunting squirrels? What's the limit here in Nebraska? 7?
Yep, and you can expect 7 squirrels in a really good spot on a 3 or 4 hour morning.
What's average?
Probably 2 or 3.
Okay.
You don't go out and shoot 7 squirrels every time. In fact, that's just not realistic. I talked to some of the guys and gals who probably forgot more about squirrel hunting than I'll ever know. And good morning, I got 4 squirrels. It's like, that's a pretty good morning. Same here. Maybe.
And those guys are sitting in one spot, you think?
Most of the time they are. If you get a good squirrel spot, you're sitting in that spot and they're just coming along this creek line, and you're just be able to pick those squirrels out. It really depends on the area. Wood lots, big fat wood lots, that's their home. You get in there in the morning, and by 9:30, 10 o'clock, sometimes they're nowhere to be found. Where they're out in the cornfield looking for corn and that kind of stuff, and they might bring ears of corn back, but the reality of it is it slows down. And so you got to decide, do I want to sit here and wait for squirrels to come back, or do I want to go find a runway that's going to be having squirrels, that go out and grab a ear of corn, nibble on it, and run back into that little fence line runway, and then go back out there. And so, I've often, and this isn't a bad tactic, I get out of the squirrel woods and go sit on the edge of the woods. And now all of a sudden my late morning, my chances have increased again, because I've got squirrels that are out in the cut cornfield, and now they're running around along the edge, usually within 100 yards, 70 yards of the wood lot, and so you can see them out there in the field. And I've taken quite a few squirrels just out in the cornfield.
And from what I'm gathering from both what Jackson's mentioned and you, Jeff, once you find those spots where you get 4, 5, 7 squirrels remember those spots.
Yeah.
Because there's probably something good even from year to year.
That's a really good point, and that's so true. It changes, but good squirrel locations are good squirrel locations. If the mass is produced and the oak trees and the den trees are there and still good or what have you, squirrels are going to use those areas. I mean, that's just good common sense. But don't be afraid. And I've done this many times, 2 or 3 mornings in a row, going out to the same wood lot that I always hunt squirrels in and sitting and hardly seeing any squirrels. And you think to yourself, geez, what's going on with the population of squirrels? And if you're smart enough to decide, okay, I'm going to go across the road to the other side, or I'm going to go to a different spot and set up there, you're going to find that sometimes squirrels just aren't there. And a good friend of ours, Stan Krause, talks about the squirrel migration. I don't know that I've noticed that, but I can tell you this. There are definitely times where you're in just a primo squirrel spot and you're not seeing squirrels for several weeks. And it can be frustrating. And if that's your only spot, it can be frustrating. That's why you got to go to some other tactics to kind of find those 1 or 2 that might be there. But they do move out of areas, and they go to areas for a lot of different reasons. So, and we got to think like a squirrel a little bit too. What do they need? Food, water, shelter, space. Shelter can be a big thing in December. And so they might leave an area that doesn't provide protection from wind or predators and go to an area that they can feed that provides that level of protection, or better den trees or what have you, or food. You sit there and look at a field and say, well, what's the difference, a bean field or a corn field? And that can be all it takes to drive squirrels out of a draw and cross the road 3-4 draws over, and all of a sudden you're back into squirrels again.
Well, I've got to say, mass producing trees, those oaks, some of the hickories and walnuts or whatever you might have in your woods, those don't change. Those are always the same. But if you're talking a cropped area, definite preference for corn. Yeah. And I think you see this in a lot of animals this time of year. Definitely corn over beans. And you think about that too. So a lot of cornfields, there's some cover there where they can hide in between the stalks. They can kind of move around a little bit less visible, even to the avian predators that might be looking. Where in a bean field, you stick out. It doesn't matter how crazy. Small a squirrel you are. Yep, you're in the middle of everything.
And your effort per kernel, I think, goes up drastically when you're in a bean field, a harvested bean field. With cornfield, if you really get down your hands and knees and start, looking through rows of corn, harvested corn, you're going to find kernels of corn everywhere. Yeah. And deer know that, squirrels know that, every critter that eats corn knows that. And so absolutely have a preference.
Got to go back to the calls. I mentioned the Mr. Squirrel whistle, which is a distress call, which might play into why they, when you hit that rabbit squealer, that squirrels respond to, and kind of the principle on the whistle, Mr. Squirrel whistle, was the same thing. You made squirrel distress sounds, or what we were told they sound like, and you'd get those squirrels coming out to bark at you and see what's going on and try to scare the predator away, was the thought. Now, this is one I've heard a lot about. I haven't had much success with, and that's trying to sound like squirrels cutting nuts.
Yes.
Where they're in there chewing, that's why they got those big sharp teeth and all that type of stuff, is to get through those tough, walnut holes, or through acorns, which aren't as bad, but hickory nuts definitely can be as thick. And, clicking quarters together. I think I even had a wooden call that had kind of a, looked like, what do I want to say, almost like threads on it, like on a screw, and a little plastic board that went back and forth to make noises on it. Yeah. I didn't have a lot of luck sound like a feeding squirrel, but I want to know if you guys have.
Not I.
Nope.
I have done that for years. In fact, my call on the stock of my gun, the checkering, I roll that wood across it, and it just sounds like that cutting on the squirrel has on getting open a nut. I can tell you, I could probably count on one hand the amount of squirrels I thought even remotely poked a head up and looked at me or gave me a response. I think in some, maybe deep south hickory groves or something, you might get some of that, but honestly, I don't. And in fact, I probably am doing that, trying to grind on my stock or whatever to have the sound of squirrels eating nuts, and they're all out in the cornfield. So they're probably not. They're probably not too worried about that. So
that's a good point.
So yeah. So I've not had a good response to that.
And you talk about some of those southern states that hunt squirrels and even deer. I mean, they have a massed report. Yeah. They're telling you how successful the acorns were, or acorns down in south are, and that really can concentrate animals. Yeah, and perhaps it's the same thing here. Food's usually not a hard thing to come by for most fox squirrels in Nebraska.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, they're busy all fall burying nuts and caching nuts and whatnot, and going out there and making sure they got something to find for winter. And then I wonder if they ever even go back to them because they're out there in the cornfields going, life is good, right?
Well, that's how acorn, oaks and stuff, that's a strategy.
That's how they generate.
Exactly. Yep.
That's how they grow forgotten caches.
Yeah, that's exactly
Those
what
forgetful
happens.
squirrels.
And I think that in Nebraska, especially in eastern Nebraska, I think they forget quite a bit because, they do need to go back to them at times, some winters. But, man, that cornfield's right there. And how many winters do we have where after the snow's there, it's there for a while. Then it melts away in a few days and you're right back to a muddy field.
So in some places, the deer kind of open up some spots where the squirrels dive into and grab some kernels from underneath. So food usually not too big of a limiting factor at all.
Yeah, no.
So I was talking about mast. With deer, there's like preferred mast, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything with that? Squirrels, do you know?
I believe that there is. I believe squirrels are just like deer. They don't like those acorns with a lot of tannic acids in them. They like the sweeter acorns, the sweeter nuts. And so I believe the same thing. I'm like in areas where I got rounded lobed oak tree leaves versus the blacks or the reds. The red oaks that got the pin oaks that got the pointed leaves. I think tannic acid. It's bitter, and squirrels, they can taste that too. So I think there's quite a.
And what's always interesting, I think we don't realize it a whole bunch. There are certain animals that just like certain things and taste better than others. It's kind of like this room. What's your favorite thing to eat? What's your favorite thing to drink?
Yep.
And I remember archery hunting for deer again. Happened to be in a spot that had a lot of walnut trees. And I just sitting there and had a good number of squirrels as well. But what was amazing is, and they were all fox squirrels. I looked at them; they all looked darker. I mean, it just like, what's going on here? Is this like a different thing? Because fox squirrels, just like grays, they can be black. I mean, they can be jet black. They can be silvery color. They can be white. They've got some others beyond just that reddish brown color. And I had one, he was big, that kind of came up to the base of my tree. And now at the belly, kind of from the chin down through the belly is usually kind of that orangish color on most fox squirrels. It was just black. Almost jet black. And I thought, this is pretty cool. Yeah. This is some type of coloration of fox squirrel going on here that's just kind of unique to this chunk of woods. Then I found out, no. It's just these guys are hitting all those walnuts, and they're not waiting until that softer outer shell disappears. They're digging in. They're getting that black stuff all over them. And sure enough, you could start seeing, you'd go down to the creek or something, they'd wash a little bit off, and you see it disappear, that type of stuff. But they were hitting walnuts hard for some reason.
Sure.
There were oaks in the area. Maybe they didn't have a great mass that year, but it was just, you could tell that one specifically. That's all he'd been eating.
So I got a little story. So coloration in squirrels, right? And then we got the two species of squirrels.
Yep.
So when I was a kid, I think I was 9-ish, had a family friend take me squirrel hunting, and I got my first squirrel. Awesome. Okay. And I wanted to have it mounted, and naturally, as a 9-year-old would, right?
You've never outgrown that, Jackson.
No.
You guys should see his office. I'm telling you right now. Everything he
First junior hire to have a taxidermist on speed dial. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that you should just take the whole squirrel to the taxidermist, and so I tried to skin it myself then take it to the taxidermist, and he broke the news to me that probably wasn't going to happen. Yeah. And so for that Christmas, my mom found, I think it was from Cabela's or something, a mounted squirrel. And that's what, she was like, this is perfect. It'll represent his first squirrel. Well, I opened it up on Christmas morning, and she's expecting me to be super happy. And I was not, because it was not a fox squirrel. It was a gray squirrel. And that was,
Poor mom.
Yeah.
We were able to save your squirrel, Jackson.
Yeah.
Here it is. No, it's not. That's fluffy. No, it's not fluffy.
It's not.
Oh, man. Now, do you still have that squirrel?
I do. Yep. I do still have that squirrel.
Poor mom.
Yep.
Poor mom.
It's just a funny story now.
Epic fails,
Yeah.
It's got to come out every Christmas. Take it to mom's house.
Remember that squirrel, Mom? Yeah, I remember the squirrel. My God.
The best intentions.
Yeah.
Love her to death.
I was going to say, that's love right there.
Yeah.
Mom was trying to help you
That
out there.
is, I don't think my mom has ever encouraged any of my harvest to be put on the wall or stuffed and over the bookcase or what have you. So kudos.
I'm not a big mount guy to begin with. I know you really are. I don't know, Hershey, are you a big mount person?
I've only got a couple.
Yeah.
I have a couple as well.
Yeah, I'm a couple, but you're right.
Yeah.
It's severe.
I'm running out of room.
I suspect you are.
I'm going to say your significant other must get a little bit nervous every time you go hunting, just thinking, how expensive is
This
this?
could be a $500 deer hunt.
Yeah,
could be a $10 deer hunt.
We've had some discussions. I give her a ton of credit because I know guys where their mounts are relegated to a room or the garage or whatnot. I give my wife a lot of credit because she's very. I've got my area, but there's also mounts all over the house.
Yeah.
So.
Jackson,
And some of
we need
hers
a
too.
clothes hanger. You got an elk.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I'm on it.
Yeah.
And some of they're hers too. Her mount this year, she's like, it's not going in the basement. It's going in the living room.
There you
I
go.
like that.
Okay.
There you go. When you have to start taking down pictures, framed pictures, though, that's where it gets
Family
a little
portraits.
iffy.
The family portraits are leaving the room and mounts are going
You really
in.
didn't smile that much, deer, in this
Right,
picture. Let's
yeah.
take that
I know
down.
what you look like.
Yeah.
I don't need a picture. So let me ask you this. We're running kind of winding down here, but is there any hack that you've ever heard of that you thought that's just dumb? That's a dumb
for
idea.
squirrel hunting.
For squirrel hunting.
Squirrel.
Yeah, we're back
Oh,
squirrel
okay.
hunting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
right,
keep
good
him
luck,
organized over here.
I think the feed call. I
Yeah.
don't see that one.
Yeah, I'd say that's a dumb one. At least for me, it has been.
I
I
hate,
don't know what goofball invented that one, but
I hate to say dumb.
Somebody must have had success with
Right.
because they
Well,
sold
like
them
I
for
said,
quite a
I think
while.
You get out of the cornfield country and you probably
Because,
get it.
well, think about it. What was it? 10 years ago, they made one for deer. Remember those little things between a spring that you kind of ground down? I don't think that lasted very long either.
And let's be honest. A lot of the hunting stuff that we buy is marketed to hunters,
yeah.
not
Oh,
to yep.
Because
Yep.
how many of us have heard a deer chew? Probably. We've seen them chew. Probably not heard them chew as much.
Well, I mean, coming from a waterfowler, how many times do you sit there at Cabela's and go, that decoy is nice, but that one looks nicer. The ducks don't care. The ducks,
Well,
no.
you guys have seen the photo that I sent, I think, to the whole group of goose decoys, where it claims, all right, we got one male rester and one female calling. Now, I don't know how intimate you have to get with a Canada goose decoy to figure out which is which. I'm not going there.
I think by the time they figure it out, you either have a bird or you're not a very good
Yeah.
hunter. I mean,
Right.
come on now.
Because they can't tell.
No, I don't think they can tell. And I
It's
think
not
when
that.
it comes to squirrels, you people, we overthink it way too much. I've already overthought it, trust me. But it works.
Yeah.
But I've already overthought it.
Here's one. Oftentimes, my dad would try to dissuade me from hunting squirrels or rabbits until the first big frost. Especially rabbits, but even squirrels, just like, nope, let that first big frost happen and gets rid of some of the bugs, the fleas, the whatever they might have on it, and then you'll be good to go. I think part of that was making me wait till the leaves fell off the trees as well. But have you heard that one before? Wait
Oh,
for the
yeah.
first good
Oh,
frost.
yeah.
Now, this year, when's that going to happen?
Yeah, well, we're still waiting. we wouldn't be squirrel hunting during the squirrel rut, I don't think, if we're waiting for that. But I've heard that. That's one. And one of my favorites that it's worked, but I just feel goofy every time I did it. There was a guy that years ago that he was a big squirrel hunter and had taught me a little bit about squirrel hunting. I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but one of the things he said is, you'll sit down and you'll call a squirrel come out of the den and he'll see you, or the others will see you, and then they'll go around the other side of the tree and you'll never see him again. And I was like, my God, I have seen that happen. I told him that. I said, you know what? You're right. They do that. He goes, here's how you fix that, son. He says, before you sit down and call to a squirrel, he says, go on the other side of that big old tree and hang your blaze orange jacket right there on the other side of the tree. And he says, now go back around the other side, sit out and call and see if that squirrel doesn't come out and favor your side. And I thought to myself, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And I did it, and I'm not kidding. A squirrel comes out of the den, he comes, looks at me, and I raise the rifle up for the shot. He turns around and goes around the other side of the tree, and I'm like, well, shoot, I wonder if he's ever going to come back. And he hightailed it back around to my side of the tree, and he just looked confused, and I helped him with his confusion. But bottom line was, it worked. But it's probably been 2 or 3 times in my life that I've done that, where I've actually taken the time, crossed the creek, go down, set that jacket up, come back down, cross.
See,
no, I don't do that.
I've heard that with a hat. Now, the one thing I've heard several times, and I think is true, is when you do harvest a squirrel and it falls and you know where it is and all that type of stuff, our first thought is, oh, success. Let's go grab that. But I know a lot of the old timers told me, nope, stay put. Because that noise, that sound, whether it's a shotgun or a rifle, doesn't really matter. Yeah. They hear loud noises all the time. Thunder, branches breaking, trees falling, whatever. But it's that sight of that predator that's really going to get them to hug tight, go back in the den, duck down, whatever it is. But if you just let it set for a little bit, maybe there's another squirrel that, all right, sound's gone, off we go.
Yeah. No, and there's a lot to that because, the worst thing you can do to screw up your squirrel woods is move around a lot and get up and go pick up a squirrel. And all of a sudden now the squirrels that are out there watching, they see that and they're like, oh, okay, that's where it came from. We don't like him. But just sit there and let that squirrel, mark the spot and sit there. Maybe call again or what have you. A lot of times you'll harvest 2 or 3 more squirrels in that area before you leave and go to a different spot. And but if you to get up and move around, it might take another 45 minutes just for things to calm down again. And that just, or it may not. You spook them. So that's a good one. But when it comes to cleaning squirrels, just the opposite strategy is true. You want to get on those squirrels as fast as you can, right? Because a warm squirrel is easy to clean. A cold squirrel, not as much.
You never hear debates, Kayla, about how long you hang a squirrel. I mean, you'll hear them for deer, and you'll hear that debate. Do I hang them? Do I hang them with skin on, skin off? What temperature does it have to be? How many days? You'll even hear that with upland birds, sometimes waterfowl. How long do I leave them hang? You got the whole blue pheasant thing over in Europe that they like to wait until that bird starts turning blue.
Which is wrong.
Yes. But you've never heard that with squirrel. Because by the time you get to that point, by the time if you pick it up, take it home to try to skin it, you might say some bad words.
You'll learn bad words if you don't say them. But I can tell you right now, warm squirrel, easy to skin. And this isn't, I'm not going to show you how to skin a squirrel, but this is pretty straightforward. You look at a squirrel carcass, pretty easy to clean. But the feet got to come off. Clip, all 4 feet, right? Okay, feet are off. That's going to make it easy to slide the hide off. Take the squirrel, take a knife up under its back, right above the vertebrae and under the skin, and open up maybe a 2-inch slit so you can get your fingers in there, and then just start pulling on opposite directions. One half of the hide's going toward the tail, one half of the hide's going toward the head, and you just turn it inside out. And once you get down to the tail, cut the tail off, cut the head off, and now you've got a completely clean squirrel body. And then you can decide, do I want to gut the squirrel? Do I just want to, quarter it? I mean, how you want to handle it from there. But it's pretty simple to do until it gets cold, until that squirrel sat for, an hour or 2. Oh, then I don't know what the bonding agent between the squirrel's hide and the mini little fat layer that's there is, but I can tell you it needs to be used in super glue.
I was going to say it'd rival Gorilla Glue after it's probably set. But all right, real quick, I know we are kind of running down on time. Recipes. What's the best thing? And to me, squirrel is one of the easiest things to work with once you have it off the bone and ready to eat.
Yeah, squirrel you can substitute for a lot of chicken recipes, soups. Really substitutes well. One of my favorites is a recipe that my mom had made before. You did that chicken and rice with the mushroom gravy sauce in a pan in the oven. Just substitute squirrel on the bone, and throw that in there. Just absolutely delicious. Soups, squirrel stews. You decide bone off or bone on. Some gals will say bone on. Absolutely the best way. It's most flavorful. Some will say take it off the bone. I don't want to look like anything that I might have remembered in the field, and so that's up to personal preference. But fried squirrel, I mean, that's about one of the easiest. One little oil in the skillet, and throw the quarters in the skillet, and just a little bit of salt and pepper, and you're just about golden there. So
when I was a kid, we'd skin them, gut them, and then the whole carcass we'd put a couple of them in a crock pot with like a citrus marinade.
Oh, I bet that's good.
It was really good. Yeah. That's how we oftentimes did it. And I'm really curious about squirrel wings. And so I think this year I might try, if I got time, priorities that line up, to get out and get some squirrels for squirrel wings. Yeah. Like
Buffalo
smoked
squirrel wings.
How do we tell him squirrels don't have wings?
Next episode.
Nervous about this one, guys.
Like, we're gonna have to cut this out.
Jackson, you're supposed to be a biologist. Come on, Jackson.
We'll catch it in editing.
So buffalo squirrel wings. Oh yeah, I've never had buffalo squirrel wings that I can remember, but I bet you those would be pretty darn good.
I've heard they're good, so I'm curious. I got to try it.
Teriyaki.
Kayla, any favorite squirrel recipes?
All I remember is Dad putting it in stuffing because he didn't want to eat squirrel.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. It's funny. A lot of people think of squirrel and they think, that's just something I don't know how to eat if I want to eat it. Squirrels are it's flavorful, but it's fairly mild. It's
delicious.
It's not as mild as rabbit, but it's pretty, on the scale of wild game, it's pretty darn mild. And so, it's one of those that you're really missing the boat. You're going to go through life, if you haven't squirrel hunted, you're going to go through life going, man, I should have done that, because they are delicious. You can get a lot of them, and it'll take a few of them to make a meal, but you can get a lot of them, and there's a ton of ways you can serve them to family and friends and just have fun with it.
And long season. I mean, ours kicks off in August.
And it goes, and
it goes all the way through the end of January.
Yep. So, I mean, we've got a lot of opportunity. And like I said, access for squirrels is just incredible here in the great state of Nebraska. A lot of wildlife areas. And outside of that, again, most landowners, squirrel hunting, really? Come on over. I mean, they're pretty good about it. We got good landowners. So anyway, get out and try it. You know, my last 20 years or so, it's been nothing but pistol hunting for squirrels. And I got to tell you, a whole new challenge. And I come home with a lot less squirrels than I used to with a 22 rifle or a 17 rifle. But I'm going to be honest with you, that's a lot of fun. And I there's days I just look forward to the weekend to get to go squirrel hunting. So.
Nice. And there you go. I think we're going to have to put the bow on this how-to squirrel session right here, folks. Again, give us a like, give us a subscribe on Facebook, Hunt Nebraska, or on any of your podcast apps, as well as YouTube. You can see us in person on our YouTube channel, Hunt Nebraska. So until next time.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.